The pressure. Hey, you know who was facing a lot of pressure were the Canadian women. They had that
Professional
two-game
segue.
qualifier against Jamaica. You like how I did that? In
Yeah.
order to qualify for the Olympics. And quite frankly, there was a lot of concern around how they would perform against a team that did better than them at the World Cup. The Canadians, we know, were noticeably upset. Why wouldn't they be? They don't make it out of the group stage at the World Cup. And there had been a lot of talk about, whether they lacked quality, whether they lacked tactical decisions or the coach did, and whether they could score ever again. And quite frankly, whether they were just lacking confidence as well, distractions off the pitch. There were just so many things swirling around, guys, that they put all of that to bed. A nice 2-0 victory on the road, come home. Jamaica scores first. It's okay. The Canadians don't crumple by any means. They come back, they win 2-1. They're going to Paris 2024. But I think the big question here, Ollie, of course, was whether Bev could put her players in a position to succeed. And we knew that something needed to change because whatever she was doing with them, she kept rolling out, whether it was same lineup, same formation at the World Cup, it just wasn't working. The definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So with her ability, which she even said, I needed to be brave. And, with her ability to make those changes and get the results, does it prove that she is the manager to lead this Canadian squad?
Yeah, I thought she got it right, and it certainly felt like a very positive step in the right direction. It's got to be sustained, obviously, now going into the Olympics, and I think Canada went to Australia for a couple of friendlies last year, changed the formation, played very well, got a lot of optimism going about where the team was at going into the World Cup the following year. And obviously that didn't last and wasn't sustained. So that's now the challenge. And you could even see it in this second game against Jamaica that now Jamaica have 90 minutes of tape on the new way you're trying to play, and there's a bit more resistance and a few more questions asked of you as a result of that. But overall, it was a very positive window. I think she, called a lot of the decisions that she needed to make correctly. There was clearly more attacking impetus to the team. Some of the changes that were made, both in terms of personnel and the positioning, also of existing players that have been ever present in the lineup. And just more ideas. Like I think we talked about it before the World Cup. Like there was kind of a lack of players who were really firmly locked into positions and also had a relationship with the players around them. The partnerships that you guys talked a lot about on the broadcast, I didn't feel were really there going into the World Cup. And part of that was obviously injury related with Becky going out and then Fleming. But even if those two had been available, it didn't really feel like that attacking identity was established. And it's very early days, but in these two games, you could see more of that. You could see more of kind of getting players like, on the right side, getting Lawrence and Leon and Fleming and even Jade Rose from that kind of right back, right centre back position, all playing in combination. Then on the left side, you had Lacasse, you had Quinn and Grosso, you had Collins, obviously, Buchanan again as the left-sided defender supporting them. It felt like there was just more relationships all over the pitch to enable not just each individual player to perform to their best, but also to get the best out of each other and to start to develop some dynamism in the attacking third. So I liked what I had to see. Now let's see it tested against stronger opposition, which is hopefully upcoming in the coming windows now that Olympic qualification is done and dusted. But it was certainly a very positive way to respond to the World Cup.
Yeah, Gareth, we had talked about it on the show, right? The hot seat and what kind of, how long was the leash for Bev Priestman? So how big was this for her in particular?
Yeah, it was big, but let's not blow this out of proportion. Something that can be ranted and raved about in a good way was the night in Toronto at BMO Field. A massive crowd, a lot of support, good vibes all around. The team showed up. They had a little bit of adversity conceding first, and you're like, okay, they didn't seem to deal with it that well when they played at the World Cup, but they dealt with it fine at that time. But I just don't want to blow things out of proportion because, like I said, heading into these games, Jamaica isn't very good. And I'm not trying to take anything away from them. They've closed the gap between them and Canada from what it was just a couple of years ago, and they're taking steps in the right direction. But this isn't the side that you want to measure yourself against. This isn't the example of what Canada is going to be able to do against the bigger and best teams in world football. When Ollie mentions there's things that Bev got right, okay, if you believe in this formation, that's a check mark in the right direction. I kind of worried that Canada, playing a 3-4-3 this way might get overrun in the midfield against better teams. They're just the midfield of Jamaica, and watching it from up top, just dropped further and further and further back. And there really wasn't a reply there. I think she got it right that Ashley Lawrence, thank God, played down the right-hand side. I don't care if it's right back. She's a right-sided player. This left-sided stuff, it was nonsense to begin with. And I'm glad that Collins has stepped up and looks like she can do a roll down that left-hand side. And the other big call was going away from some of the experience, like a player like Christine Sinclair, and allowing some of the younger players like a Lacasse to come in and play a bigger role in the team. And that seemed to work as well. So overall, mission accomplished, job done. But still, for me, plenty of questions still to be answered. And I'm not sure that this team, based upon that performance, has changed my mind about them exceptionally one way or the other.
I think we all can agree that Canada needs to be tested, right? I know that Jamaica, this was make or break for Bev Priestman, also for the players, because not qualifying for the World Cup would have been a catastrophe. But it was a good step, right? A positive step. Sorry for the Olympics, forgive me. That would have been a catastrophe. So it was a good step. Playing at home, sold out crowd, having everyone behind you, and you also showed up for the occasion in terms of goals and just energy and the chemistry that we saw throughout the pitch. So I think Bev showed it was a step in the right direction in terms of leading a squad, because if you can get behind that team and start playing like that in front of better competition, this is a Canada that can go far. But I agree with Wheels in terms of that it just feels too soon, right? Like a two-legged affair in a 4-day span against the Jamaica side. Honestly, the second leg too didn't have the best player in Bunny Shaw. That was probably the only player up top that could really stretch Canada's lines. She didn't even play. I don't know if it was because of injury or whatever it was, but she didn't get a sniff the second leg. So they really weren't tested. I like the new formation. I like how it kind of brings out the best in the best players. Fleming's on the ball a lot more. Ashley Lawrence, I agree with you, Wheels, bombing down the right side. She's the best player for Canada to beat someone 1v1. You have her in a position to do that. And there were 2 goals that came from that and 2 legs. Yeah. First goal, obviously, with the 1-0 goal in Kingston, and then the 2-1 goal at home. She's just dynamite and dangerous. You can interchange. But what do you do when you have a team that is better on the ball and you have to run? These are all questions that Bev needs to figure out. But I do like the performance both of them, and just where this team could go if they play like that.
Yeah, their story is far from over, because we had even mentioned this on the broadcast, that this is a team that does perennially well at Olympics and typically gets the job done in their CONCACAF region. It's always at the World Cup stage where they struggle. We know this. This is literally their story. And we have to wonder at what point, where does that change? When will that change? But they did what they needed to do. This was the task ahead of them, and they did it. Bev Priestman needed to make changes, and she did it. Loves to use that phrase, right? Be brave. And that was something she even said that she needed to be, because she felt she got away from that. So to your point, Sydney Collins goes in, Chloe Lacasse gets the start. Also, Nichelle Prince playing a little bit more as that number 9, to your point, moving Ashley Lawrence to the right, playing with 3 at the back. And you said the name there, Gareth, Christine Sinclair. This is somebody who didn't get into game 1 and then came in game 2 as a substitution when the game was pretty much wrapped up. It was 2-1 at that point. I mean, Jamaica needed to score 5 goals if they wanted to beat Canada on aggregate. So it was pretty much done. She comes on in. So this was Bev Priestman. Of course, she was asked about it, and making Christine Sinclair a sub.
Yeah, I think, coming into this window, Christine told me, I want to get this team to the Olympics. Like, I'm ready, get me in. And that's the conversation that we've had to date. I think naturally with every player after this window, we'll sit down, we'll reflect. And I think, Christine is no different this window than what she's ever been. It's next game, next training session, and is the ultimate professional. So naturally, I think with everybody, we'll sit down, and I think, that wider conversation no doubt will be there. But I must say, for someone who's carried this team, for so many years, and to come in and, that's a difficult role to come in and all of a sudden you've been a starter and you're a finisher and you're on home soil. She's handled herself like an absolute professional and the true Canadian that she is, humble, respectful, and a professional. She went in, she did her job, she put her ego to the side, and got this team to the Olympics, which is what she committed to coming into this window.
That last line, I think, is something that we probably want to zone in on a little bit more. Got this team to the Olympics. And I will say, gentlemen, I'm pretty blessed to work with a lot of Olympians. I cover a lot of Olympians. I interview a lot of Olympians. It is difficult to make an announcement on when it's time to hang up whatever equipment, in this case, hang up the cleats. So the messaging, I can understand that the messaging is going to change. Get them to the Olympics, because we were always under the impression, because Wheels, the language has always been that Christine would be at the Olympics. This is somebody who, even coming out of Portland, there's talk that there's another year of professional soccer under her belt. This isn't somebody who's ready to completely retire from the game. However, based on what Bev just said there, and the fact that our cameras showed Christine Sinclair visibly sad, she was crying. She was outright crying. Shalina Zadorsky was comforting her. Other players are coming around her. Post game, when I went downstairs and was talking to as many people as I can, even including some people with Canada Soccer, it was kind of intimated that that could have been, or at least there's going to be, a final home game for her, a retirement game. I mean, the word retirement now, Wheels, is something we're starting to hear.
Yeah, it surprises me. It caught me by surprise. I mean, I think that all of us who watch this team play as much as we do and watch the professional game understand that she isn't the player that she once was. That's quite clear. But I guess the assumption, even at the age of 40, she'll be 41 next summer, was that she would go on and play with Canada at the Olympics. So there was a little bit more runway there. And I just thought, from a professional perspective as well, yeah, she wants to play next year. And I always thought it was the perfect fit for Sinclair to maybe step away from the national team, then commit herself to Project 8 and being the crown jewel of any Canadian women's professional league that's established. Like, what better name to bring in an experienced player like that to kind of be the face of a new league and a new era of professional women's soccer in this country. But when you saw the emotion after the game and some of what people have intimated and suggested and said, it certainly looks like her time with the national team is coming to an end. Is she still good enough? That's the question. Is she still good enough to be part of, what will it be, like a 20-player Olympic side? Like the squads for the Olympics were expanded last time around because of COVID. I'm not sure what they'll be this time around, but is she good enough to make it in the team? What does Christine want? And what is Bev Priestman's role in this? I mean, it had to be difficult for her watching the first leg being played in Kingston, Jamaica, and not coming off the bench. And then coming off when really the tie was done and dusted in this. It's got to be a very sobering moment for a person that Bev rightly says has put this country on her back for the last 2 decades in terms of the national team, taking a good Canada team and making it great. So some big decisions need to be made. I hope that the communication around this might be a little bit better. Like, it would have been, I know it's a competitive game, and I'm not saying anyone's to blame or anyone's at fault here, but she needs a send-off that she so richly deserves, and let's hope that that's communicated and done the right way. I still wouldn't rule out this runway being extended a little bit more, but perhaps based on what you're hearing, Andy, and what others are hearing, that the end is nigh. So
yeah, hey, that's my line.
I know. I thought I threw that out for you.
Time is nigh.
The time is nigh. But and that's why I say, like, this messaging, it's so strange. Like, it can change, because at the end of anyone's career, especially when you are, this type of legacy player, it always can be a little weird. It can always be a little bit awkward, because here's the thing: Bev Priestman may very well want her to be a part of the team from a leadership point of view. She might say, listen, you're not going to get a lot of playing time. You may continue to be a bench player. You may or may not come off the bench. Christine now has to ask herself if that's a role she wants to play, because you're going to just, because of that role, graduate into more of that off the pitch leader as opposed to on. So you leave that perhaps in the hands of the player. But I mean, Jordan, this is obviously a difficult decision for any manager, because when you do feel that you've now moved on, like the formation, the tactics, the player personnel, you have other people who fill those roles and who you feel can do it maybe a little bit better, only because somebody, tough decision even for a manager.
Take it away, Jordan.
Yeah, so I'll say that when it gets at the end of every season or end of calendar year, you're questioning and you always want to evaluate yourself as a player, right? What you want to do, what you want to accomplish moving forward. Christine Sinclair, everyone knows she's going to the end of her career, but the Christine Sinclair who has scored big goals, plays in big games, almost seems like it's no longer. Like she might just be a sub, and that might just play in her head a little bit and say, I don't know if I'm willing and ready to do that. That doesn't mean that she doesn't love her country. That doesn't mean that she doesn't love her team. That just means she views herself in a certain light. And for me, I respect that. Like she's been the outright number 9, someone to carry the country on her back, score big goals, play in big games, and maybe coming off the bench or maybe in a 2-leg affair against Jamaica and not being played is like, man, I don't know if I could continue doing this on for another cycle, another Olympics. So looking at the tears at the end of the game, I was kind of signaling to you, Andy, while we were on the broadcast, just like what's going, because the tears were, it seemed like that was it. Like it seemed like this is, if not the last, one of the last games. And you got to think of context as well. This is something where you're excited. You just qualified for the Olympics. You're with the girls and players that you've battled with. And you're crying. You're like sincere and wasn't overjoyed or overwhelmed. It was like, this could be it. There has to be a send-off game for Christine Sinclair. She's a pioneer, as I said before. The old and new, everyone goes through Christine Sinclair. Either played with her, worked with her, or she's a role model for the young players. Like an Olivia Smith coming up, a 19-year-old, grew up watching Christine Sinclair, like Charmaine Hooper, like big names. Like definitely, they're all tied together. So she's someone that is so decorated. But it was so sad almost to see her that choked up, because for me it ended an era. Like it signified that, like for her to be that emotional, I know that was probably the last, if not one of the last games she'll ever play for Canada.
I think it was like the loudest cheer of the game, honestly, was when Sinclair was coming on the field.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It felt like it, Ollie.
Yeah, that felt like it was it to me. Like obviously we could still be surprised and maybe we're reading it all wrong, but it certainly felt like to me that Christine Sinclair was on the understanding that she was playing probably her last competitive game for Canada. I'm sure, as you guys said, that there'll be some kind of send-off. I believe I'm right in saying that they've intimated that they're hoping to play at home in the upcoming windows before the end of the year. So maybe that'll be the opportunity to do that. But just all the signs throughout the week kind of suggested to me that maybe this is it. I didn't see Sinclair do any media during the window. Her role in the games obviously was reduced from what we've typically seen it. The emotions after the game, we just saw the video of there were very apparent. And there was a moment when she came onto the pitch there as well where it looked like Jessie Fleming tried to give her the captain's armband and she kind of ignored her. And eventually she got it because Fleming basically insisted that she take it and wear it. But that seemed like kind of a symbolic moment as well. So I've always thought that like when Sinclair decides to retire, she's not going to do it like the Megan Rapinoe farewell tour and press conference and all. She'll just she'll put out a tweet or a press release or something one day, and that'll be it, and she'll be gone. And that it kind of felt like that kind of way of handling it in this window. The other thing that we've got to talk about as well is, as much as we all appreciate what she's done for Canada and how much of a legend this player is in Canadian soccer, is what Will's touched on earlier. Like the Olympic rosters, if they're not expanded again as they were for COVID's, they're 18 players, 11 starters and 7 substitutes. And we all remember Jordan Heitzmer initially missing out on the Tokyo roster. Like there is a
Sophie Schmidt as well.
Sophie Schmidt, there is a reasonable argument to be had as to who is in that 18. When you see Sinclair come off the bench for 30 minutes out of 180. In these 2 games. So I'm sure that factors in as well. But yeah, it felt like to me we were probably watching the last competitive game of her Canada career.
Very sad. I feel old. Like if my entire adult life has been Sinclair dominating, right? Like it's these sorts of things are emotional, and it just won't be Christine that's emotional. It'll be her teammates and the millions of fans around the world that have supported her career. So we'll see what happens here over the upcoming weeks, but I think you guys are kind of right in your intuition.